بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون. هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون. لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون. سلام قولا من رب رحيم. 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 بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of you on Eid-e-Ghadeer. May the bright light of this blessed event fill all the lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam in the world in the light of joy, peace, health, wealth, and happiness. Ameen. Our program will be as follows. We will have some qasidas recited by local mu'mineen, and finally, a speech by our guest speaker, Moulana Syed Blial Rizvi. With this, I would like to invite Brother Hussein Ali to recite a rubai. Brother Hussein Ali.
صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد. تکمیل دین نام ہے جشن غدیر کا. تکمیل دین نام ہے جشن غدیر کا. بھیجا ہے تاج رب نے نبی کے وزیر کا. آؤ علی کے چاہنے والوں خوشی خوشی. آؤ علی کے چاہنے والوں خوشی خوشی. یہ جشن ہو رہا ہے جناب امیر کا. صلوات.
This was Brother Hussein Ali. And now I would like to invite Janab Amir Haider to recite a qasida.
السلام علیکم یا علی مدد تمام مومنین کو سننے والوں کو میری طرف سے عید غدیر بہت بہت مبارک ایک اردو قصیدے کے چند اشعار پیش کر رہا ہوں تمام مومنین درود پڑھ لے بر محمد و آل محمد اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد واجعل فرجہم مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی مولا کو پکارا کرتے ہیں مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی مولا کو پکارا کرتے ہیں لجپال ہمیشہ دکھیوں کی لجپال ہمیشہ دکھیوں کی بگڑی کو سوارا کرتے ہیں مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی قدرت کے مقرر کردہ سب اوقات بدل ہی جاتے ہیں قدرت کے مقرر کردہ سب اوقات بدل ہی جاتے ہیں مغرب کی سیاہی عصر بنے دن رات بدل ہی جاتے ہیں اللہ کے مظہر انگلی کا اللہ کے مظہر انگلی کا جب ایک اشارہ کرتے ہیں مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی لا ریب ہے یہ مخلوق خدا لیکن مرزات پہ قادر ہیں لا ریب ہے یہ مخلوق خدا لیکن مرزات پہ قادر ہیں اللہ کی طرف سے یہ بندے اموات و حیات پہ قادر ہیں زندہ کو مار کے مردے کو زندہ کو مار کے مردے کو زندہ بھی دوبارہ کرتے ہیں مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی کہتے ہیں سبھی کے مولا علی حبدار کی قبر میں آتے ہیں کہتے ہیں سبھی کے مولا علی حبدار کی قبر میں آتے ہیں حبدار سبھی یہ شوق لیے بے خوف لحد میں جاتے ہیں ہم ان کی زیارت کی خاطر ہم ان کی زیارت کی خاطر مرنا بھی گوارا کرتے ہیں مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی الفت ہے صحابہ سے ہم کو واللہ کسی سے بیر نہیں، الفت ہے صحابہ سے ہم کو، واللہ کسی سے بیر نہیں، جنت ہے ہماری آنکھوں کی، جو آل نبی کا غیر نہیں، لیکن جو علی کے دشمن ہیں، لیکن جو علی کے دشمن ہیں، ہم ان سے کنارہ کرتے ہیں، مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی، مولا کو پکارا کرتے ہیں، لجپالے ہمیشہ دکھیوں کی، لجپالے ہمیشہ دکھیوں کی، بگڑی کو سوارا کرتے ہیں، مشکل میں سبھی شیعان علی۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجہم۔
This was Janab Amir Haider. Now I would like to invite Janab Anis Hassan to recite a qasida.
درود بر محمد و آل محمد، اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد۔ منقبت غدیر عید غدیر کے حوالے سے، غدیر خون کا سورج کا کیا پرکار کرتا ہے، غدیر خون کا سورج کا کیا پرکار کرتا ہے، غدیر خون کا سورج کام کیا پرکار کرتا ہے، غدیر خون کا سورج کام کیا پرکار کرتا ہے، کسی کو نور کرتا ہے، کسی کو نار کرتا ہے، کسی کو نور کرتا ہے، کسی کو نار کرتا ہے، ولایت سے علی کی آج جو انکار کرتا ہے، ولایت سے علی کی آج جو انکار کرتا ہے، وہ اپنے بد نسب ہونے کا خود اقرار کرتا ہے، وہ اپنے بد نسب ہونے کا خود اقرار کرتا ہے۔ اور شعر ملاحظہ فرمائیے گا، نشان دیوار کا یہ آج بھی اقرار کرتا ہے، نشان دیوار کا یہ آج بھی اقرار کرتا ہے، کہ کعبہ ٹوٹ کر مولا علی سے پیار کرتا ہے، کہ کعبہ ٹوٹ کر مولا علی سے پیار کرتا ہے۔ ہنسی میسام کے ہونٹوں پر دم آخر ہے کیوں مولا، ہنسی میسام کے ہونٹوں پر دم آخر ہے کیوں مولا، مجھے لگتا ہے جیسے آپ کا دیدار کرتا ہے، مجھے لگتا ہے جیسے آپ کا دیدار کرتا ہے۔ یہی پہچان ہے لوگوں زمانے میں مقصر کی، یہی پہچان ہے لوگوں زمانے میں مقصر کی، زبان اقرار کرتی ہے عمل انکار کرتا ہے، زبان اقرار کرتی ہے عمل انکار کرتا ہے۔ نصیحری سے بڑا مشرک نہیں دیکھا کوئی میں نے، نصیحری سے بڑا مشرک نہیں دیکھا کوئی میں نے، جو اپنے ہی خدا کی بات کا انکار کرتا ہے، جو اپنے ہی خدا کی بات کا انکار کرتا ہے۔ تجھے تشویش ہے واعظ تو لڑ اللہ سے جا کے، تجھے تشویش ہے واعظ تو لڑ اللہ سے جا کے، فضائل پر علی کے مجھ سے کیوں تکرار کرتا ہے، فضائل پر علی کے مجھ سے کیوں تکرار کرتا ہے، نشادی مار کا یہ آج بھی اقرار کرتا ہے، نشادی مار کا یہ آج بھی اقرار کرتا ہے، کہ کعبہ ٹوٹ کر مولا علی سے پیار کرتا ہے، کہ کعبہ ٹوٹ کر مولا علی سے پیار کرتا ہے، غدیر خون کا سورج کہاں کیا پرکار کرتا ہے، کسی کو نور کرتا ہے کسی کو نار کرتا ہے. درود بر محمد وعلی محمد. اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد وعجل فرجہ.
Anis bhai, we still have time. If you recite one more qasida for 5 minutes until Moulana Sahab joins us.
درود بر محمد وعلی محمد. اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد وعجل فرجہ. شاہ مردان شیر یزدان قوت پروردگار لا فتح الا لیلا سیر الا ذوالفقار جو ایک بار بنا جو ایک بار بنا ہے وہ شاہکار ہوں میں زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں آج اپنا تعارف تمہیں کراتی ہوں حجاب اپنی ہی خلقت سے میں اٹھاتی ہوں حسب نسب ہے میرا کیا بھی بتاتی ہوں میں مثل میسا مسلمان علی کی ساتھی ہوں خدا نے نور کے قالب میں مجھ تو ڈھالا ہے فلک پہ کتنے برس کبریاء نے پالا ہے زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں احد کے رن میں میری رسم رونمائی ہوئی زمین پہ پہلے ہی دن کفر سے لڑائی ہوئی علی کی قوت بازو سے روشنائی ہوئی شکست رونے لگی ایسی جگ ہنسائی ہوئی خدا نے غیب سے لشکر کشائی دی ہے مجھے رسول پاک نے خود منہ دکھائی دی ہے مجھے زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں ہر ایک جری میرے جوہر کا مدح خوان رہا میری امان سے جو نکلا وہ بے امان رہا بشر رہا نہ کوئی جسم پہ نشان رہا ہمیشہ جنگ میں مجھ کو یہ اطمینان رہا ابو تراب نے مجھ پر یہ اعتبار کیا پلا کے لاش نہ دیکھی جو میں نے وار کیا زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں منافقوں کو نئے معجزے دکھاتی ہوں، علی علی کا جہاں کو سبق سکھاتی ہوں، خزاں کو اپنے اشاروں پہ میں نچاتی ہوں، سروں کو سر سے ہواؤں میں اڑاتی ہوں، علی کے ہاتھ پہ سجدہ میری عبادت ہے، خدا کے ہاتھ میں رہنے کی مجھ کو عادت ہے، زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں، زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہار ہوں میں، فداء کے روز یہ میں نے کہا تھا مولا سے، میرے امام وغا کی مجھے رضا دے دے، ہوئے ہیں لوگ جو مجرم جناب زہرا کے، ہر ایک اشک کی قیمت ابھی چکائیں گے، کسی کو مجھ سے میسر رہے فرار نہیں، جگر جو کاٹ کے رکھ دوں تو زلف قہر نہیں، زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہر ہوں میں، زمانہ جہاں لے حیدر کی زلف قہر ہوں میں۔ درود اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔
Thank you, Anis Bhai. We are honored to have Moulana Syed Blial Rizvi with us to celebrate the Jashan of Eid-e-Ghadeer. Moulana Sahab is a well-known motivational speaker who knows how to connect and inspire people, especially our youth. He attended Loyola University, Chicago for his graduate studies, and currently he is studying in Najaf, Iraq. With this, I would like to invite Maulana Syed Bilal Rizvi.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والإبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الردبية والجود التقوية والنقابة النقبية والهيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اليوم يئس الذين كفروا من دينكم فلا تخشوهم واخشوني اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I begin in the name of God, the infinitely compassionate, the all-merciful, the one who continuously sends his blessings down upon us one after another, to the extent that we are never devoid of the blessings of God. But when God, he sends his blessings, you find that out of these blessings, the value of each of them is not at an equal level. There are some which have more value and there are some which have less value. And each of them has a right. It has a haq which is proportionate to the value of that blessing. If I were to say to you that is food and drink a blessing, you would say it's a blessing. But at the same time, you would say life and existence itself is a greater blessing. Why? Because this sustenance is a means towards life. And you find there are blessings upon blessings. But as you examine each of these blessings, you find a point will come where there is a blessing which is considered greater than any other, and that blessing is none other than the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. As the verse of the Quran, it states that when Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi, when the Imam was asked about the verse of the Quran that says, ثُمَّ لَا تُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ, the verse from Surah Al-Takatur, the 18th verse, that verily, verily, you will be asked about the greatest blessing upon the Day of Judgment. So Imam Sadiq, he says that, what do the people say this blessing is? One person, he says it is the ma'kulat, what a person eats. Another said it is the mashrubat, what a person drinks. Imam Sadiq says to these individuals that if you have a generous host and he invites you towards his house and you go to his home and you eat and you drink, have you ever seen him stand at the door and ask you, what was it? How much did you eat? What did you take from me? The man says, no, I've never seen this. Imam Sadiq says that Allah is Saqiyul Asqiya, that Allah is the generous of the generous. He says his greatest blessing is not this, but his greatest blessing is the wilaya of us, Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. And today I congratulate you all upon this occasion of Eid-e-Ghadeer. I wasn't able to join you in person as of the situation of the world at the moment, but it is still a day of celebration. It is that day where we celebrate the recognition that we have of the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this is that day which has been called the Greatest Eid, that when Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi would describe Eid-e-Ghadeer, he would say, Huwa Eidullah al-Akbar, that this is the greatest Eid. This is that Eid that Imam al-Rida salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi would say, that I heard from my father, who heard from his father, meaning Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, Inna yawm al-Ghadir fi samai ashharu minhu fil ardi, that the day of Ghadir in the heavens is more well known than upon the earth. You see, this is a point which needs to be understood, is that why does the Imam say it? Because when the Imam, he says sama, it does not just literally mean the sky which we see above us with the clouds and with the blueness that we've come to know, but rather the sama in the ideology of the Quran within Islamic mysticism is that realm where unveiling has occurred, where realization, it exists in its truest form. In the heavens, when all of the realities are veiled as opposed to this, unveiled as opposed to this worldly life, you find the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the day of Ghadir, is more well known in the heavens than upon the earth. But there are very 3 points about why this is a day of Eid before continuing on to the main subject of tonight's discussion. You see, there are fundamentally 3 points which are examined and found in all of the different days of Eid. The first point is that the day of Eid is seen as the day of completion. That when you have Eid al-Fitr, It is that day where the month of Ramadan and that period of fasting and purification is completed, so you have a day of Eid. When you have Eid al-Adha, you find that upon the completion of the Hajj ceremonies, you have a day of Eid. So over here, the question comes, is that number one, why is Eid al-Ghadeer the greatest Eid? And what is completed upon the day of Ghadir? You see, in Eid al-Fitr, fasting was completed. In Eid al-Adha, the Hajj was completed. But upon this day, something greater than the month of Ramadan, something greater than the ceremony of Hajj was completed. And that is the religion of Islam itself, as the Quran it says, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, that upon this day we have perfected, we have completed your religion upon this day. So because of this completion, you find that Eid al-Ghadir has been given a primary position over the other days of Eid. The second aspect of Eid is that Eid is a day of celebration after striving. That in the month of Ramadan, when you celebrate and you have Eid, it's 30 days you were waking up early. It's 30 days you were fasting. It's 30 days you were making an effort. And then after that, you have a day of Eid. And the ceremonies of Hajj, you find it is throughout that period that you were striving and you have a day of Eid. But over here, you find that who is the one who strove for this effort? You find it is 124,000 prophets that strove for this effort. That each prophet, one after another, would give a system of guidance from God, and he would give every effort in that realm for the guidance to reach the people and for it to remain. And after one prophet, another prophet would come. You find in the same manner, 124,000 prophets they came. Each of them, they gave a system of guidance. Each of them, they made an effort. But at this point, there needed to be a seal of wilayah. There needed to be a seal that effort, it is there. That effort, it remains alive. And you find the fruit of the efforts of 124,000 prophets was the announcement of the wilayah of Ali bin Abi Talib. Doesn't the Quran say, Ya ayyuhar Rasul balligh ma unzila ilayk? That, O Prophet, give to them, preach to them what we have revealed upon you, O Rasulullah. And if you don't preach this, it's as if you've given nothing from your risala. And when this verse it came down on no other day than upon the day of Ghadir. So this is that day of Ghadir. And there's many different aspects of Amir al-Mu'mineen one could mention upon this day. But when it comes to speaking about Ali bin Abi Talib, in reality, it is trying to take a drop from the ocean, that when you place your hands in water, you find that water, it slips from the hand, and the only thing which is left upon your hand is the residue. And that's the reality of speaking about Amir al-Mu'mineen. But you find even in this residue of knowledge that we have of the Imam, you find that one, he comes to some form of an understanding, even though one can't reach the total understanding of this individual. After all, the hadith of the Prophet says, Ya Ali, ma araf Allah illa ana wa ant. That, O Ali, none has recognized Allah except for you and I. Wa ma arafani illa Allah wa ant. And none has understood Allah except for myself and you, O Ali. And then he says, وَمَا عَرَفَكَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَأَنَا. And O Ali, none has understood you except for Allah and myself. You see, this is that individual. When Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, he wanted to write a book about the spiritual status of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would say that although the tongues of the speakers, they fall short, and the hands of the writers, they tremble when they begin to describe that sultan who says in Nahjul Balagha that I am as the summit, Up to me no bird can soar, down from me the torrents pour. He says the example of Ali in the Ummah is that he is the misdaq of the verse, Laysa kamithlihi shay, there is none like him amongst the Ummah. And from amongst the companions, he is a manifestation of kufuwan ahad, that there is no equal towards him from amongst the companions. For what God possesses in total perfection by his essence, the perfect man, Al-Insanul Kamil, Ali bin Abi Talib, he possesses at the status of faqr, at the status of poverty. And this is Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali bin Abi Talib. You see, this Imam is that Imam who is considered universal in the truest sense of the word. That when you look at the word universal in the English language, you find that it comes from a Latin root, which is unum versus alias, which means one amongst many. That when you go through life and the multitude of life, you find that there is a common aspect amongst mankind, that people, their background may differ, their faith may differ, but you find that the Imam is a figure who is universal in the truest sense, that when you look at the different factions within Islam, you find that after Rasulullah, the only one who can bring true unity is Ali bin Abi Talib, because within the theology of the Shia, he is seen as the first Imam. In the theology of the Ahlul Sunnah, he's seen as the fourth rightly guided Caliph. Amongst the orders of Tasawwuf and the Sufi orders, you find every order except for one goes back towards Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib. So amongst all of the different groups in Islam, you find after the Prophet, the most universal figure is the figurehead of Ali bin Abi Talib. And this is that Imam, that upon this day of Ghadir, that Rasulullah on the way back from his final Hajj, he stops the individuals in by a pond which had the name of You find over there, he says, O Salman, gather the saddles of the camels. Salman, from the saddles, he makes a mimbar for Rasulullah. On three sides of the Prophet, you find the men, they would stand behind Rasulullah, the women, they would stand. Rasulullah would say to a companion that whatever I say, make sure you speak loudly so others can hear. Then Rasulullah, you find he begins to give the longest sermon of his life. You see, on that day, the sermon of Ghadir was the longest khutbah which Rasulullah has given within his life, spanning from 2.5 to 3 hours long. And Rasulullah, in a line after line, he explicates the position of Amir al-Mu'mineen, but there is one line which is immortalized in history, a line which we remember today, that line where Rasulullah, he says, Man kuntu mawlahu fahada aliyun mawla, that whoever's master I am, Amir Ali bin Abi Talib is his master. You find this line is one of the most discussed and debated lines in all of Islamic history. And what do I mean that it's debated? I don't mean that it is debated from the aspect of its authenticity, because you find that even somebody like Ahmad bin Hanbal, he says that this line of Rasulullah has been narrated from 30 different companions, and it has reached the stage of tawatur. Of course, the stage of tawatur in ilm al-hadith, in ilm al-diraya, in rijal, is that status when a hadith is narrated so often and so consecutively amongst each generation that there is no doubt within that hadith. And you find from amongst the tawaturat, from amongst these hadith, is this hadith and this line from the day of Ghadir. But no, what has been debated is that what is the meaning of the word Maula within this hadith? And you find there are many aspects to speak about the subject, but one individual who wrote extensively on the subject was Shaykh al-Mufid, when he writes in his famous treatise, which has been called Aqsamul Maula fil Quran fil Adab, that the different meanings of the word Maula within the Quran and within Arabic adabiyat and Arabic literature. You see the word Maula, he has given 10 different meanings for the word Maula. And in the famous dictionary, Lisanul Arab of Ibn al-Mandur, which is here on my left side, you find Ibn al-Mandur, he mentions 13 meanings for the word Maula. But you find that out of all of these different meanings, as you'll see, there's only one meaning which is appropriate upon that day, and that is the original meaning of the word, which is Ola bitta'a wa tasarruf, that one is preferred for obedience and for exercising authority. You see, the word Maula in the Arabic language, either it can come as awla, that one has authority over another person. You see, when you look at the Quran, you find this first meaning is found within the Quran, and that is in chapter 57, verse 15, where the Quran, it says, فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْكُمْ فِدْيَةٌ وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارِ هِيَ مَوْلَاكُمْ وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. The Quran, it says that upon that day, a recompensation will not be taken from amongst any of you, from those who disbelieve. And your abode is the hellfire, and it is your master. Now, it's interesting that the Quran, it uses the word Maula for the fire of hell. Over here, what this means, according to the Mufassirun, is that this condition of being in that eternal chastisement was a position which has authority over them. So this is the first meaning and the original meaning of the word Maula. That Maula means to have authority. And in the Arabic language, you find that different meanings, they come from an original root meaning. And all of these other meanings, they return towards this aspect. So you find the first meaning of Maula is that one who has authority. The second meaning of Maula is a person who is a slave owner. The third meaning of Maula in Arabic is Ibn al-Am, your cousin, the son of your uncle. The next meaning of the word Maula is a Nasir and a helper. When the Quran says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ مَوْلَى الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَأَنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ لَا مَوْلَى لَهُمْ, that Allah is the master of those who believe, He is the helper of those who believe, and the kafirin and the disbelievers have no helper. So you find in this verse, it comes in this context. After that, you find somebody who is charged with a crime is also called Maula. A confidant and a helper of a tribe is called Maula. A neighbor is called Maula. A tribal leader is called Maula. An emancipated and freed slave is called Maula. And a slave owner is called Maula. So you find all of these different meanings. They exist for the word Maula. So the question comes up is that how do we understand that on the day of Ghadir, the meaning of Maula used by the Prophet was the meaning that authority, it belongs to Ali bin Abi Talib. And this is a fundamental point and important discussion to be had. You find that when it comes to the utilization of language, when I am speaking to you, the goal is for me to make you understand and for you to understand me. And the medium of understanding is words. That's why a word has an ability to break the heart of an individual. It has an ability to cause misunderstanding. Amir al-Mu'mineen would say about the tongue that, its weight is small, but its power is great. So when people, they speak to each other, the natural way and natural convention is that I use the apparent meaning of a word. The apparent meaning is the commonly accepted meaning. And I'll give you an example. If I was in a courtroom and used against me is a piece of evidence where I said I stole this item, I cannot say to the judge, oh, when I meant stole, I didn't literally mean steal. What I meant is, this and that. No, the judge would say, this is the apparent meaning of the word. So when you use language, you use the apparent meaning. And if you don't use the apparent meaning, then you have to have some sort of indication that, no, this is not the literal meaning. This is an allusion towards it. When I say that he is like a lion, and I mean bravery, then you find there is an additional factor. And that factor is that this is something which is in common usage. But when you look within common usage, you find the common meaning of the word Maula is the meaning of authority and closeness. That's why people, they discuss what the word wilaya means. In the Arabic lexical dictionaries, you find the word wilaya. In its original sense, it means when you place two things so close to each other where you don't know where one begins and the other ends. And in this sense, you have the common meaning of authority, of the meaning of Maula. And Sheikh al-Mufid within this treatise, he says that if you take any other meaning, if you take any other meaning besides this meaning that the Prophet said, whoever I am a master of, Ali is his master, then either you are ignorant of the Arabic language or you have hatred towards Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. These are the only possible two conclusions. Because the evidence is there within the hadith that Maula, it meant master, and evidence is there from outside of the sermon and hadith. From the internal evidence, which alludes to the fact that Maula over here means master, is that Rasulullah, before he says, Man kuntu Maula fahada Aliyun Maula, whoever is master I am, Ali is his master, he says, Alastu awla bikum min anfusikum? That am I not more worthy than your own selves? Do I not have more closeness and greatness and authority than your own selves? Everyone says, Bala ya Rasulullah. Then after that, he says this line. And when he says this line, Man kuntu Maula fahada Aliyun Maula, he says, whoever's master I am, Ali is his master. You see this fa in Arabic. It symbolizes a continuation, and it means a continuation with a sense of urgency. When he says, Man kuntu Maula fahada Aliyun Maula, the Prophet in reality, when I'm translating the statement, he says, whoever is master I am, then with urgency take Ali bin Abi Talib as your master. And this is that reality. But you find that outside of the evidence within this sermon of Ghadir, you find that there are many individuals who strove to establish what happened on the day of Ghadir and the meaning of this word Maula. And amongst those individuals was Allam al-Amini. Allam al-Amini, he wrote a famous book called Al-Ghadir fil Kitab wa Sunnah, the event of Ghadir within the Quran and within the Sunnah of the Prophet. And about 2 volumes of this book is discussing different poetry about the day of Ghadir. And one of the most famous lines of poetry are by the poet Hassan bin Thabit, who is one of the most famous poets of Islamic history. You know, Hassan, when he writes about the day of Ghadir, he says in his poetry that فَقَالَ لَهُ قُمْ يَا عَلِي فَإِنَّنِي رَضِيتُكَ مِنْ بَعْدِ إِمَامًا وَهَادِيًا فَمَنْ كُنْتُ مَوْلَاهُ فَهَذَا وَلِيُّهُ وَكُونُوا لَهُ أَنْصَارَ صِدْقٍ مُوَالِيًا. He says to the Prophet, O Prophet, can I recite a line of poetry? Rasulullah says, Oh Hassan, recite a line of poetry upon this day of Ghadir. Hassan, he says that he said to him, Stand, O Ali, for I am pleased with you being the Imam and the guide after me. And then he says, whoever's master I am, then you are his wali, O Ali, and be a truthful helper towards him and a lover of Ali bin Abi Talib. You know, when on the day of Ghadir, Hassan, he writes these lines, he recites these lines. Everyone has recorded, whether Shi'i or non-Shi'i, that Rasulullah, he says a line towards Hassan. He says, Hassan, لا تزال يا حسان مؤيدا بروح القدس ما نصرتنا باللسانك. He says, oh Hassan, may Ruh al-Qudus not stop supporting you. When you recited these lines of poetry for us, you didn't support us with your tongue only. It is we who supported you. That's why, Imam Sadiq, he says to Hisham ibn al-Hakam that, oh, Hisham, he says to Imam Sadiq, that oftentimes when I go and I discuss your imamat and your wilaya, I don't have a response towards the opposing side, but then in my mind an answer it comes. Imam Sadiq, he says to Hisham, oh Hisham, we are the ones who give you that answer. You think it, but we are the ones who are giving that reality. So you find it has been established that the word Maula only has one meaning that is applicable over here, and that is the meaning of master, and that is the meaning which a person he accepts. But what does it mean for Amir al-Mu'mineen to be considered that master and that Maula? And indeed, an important dimension of this is the dimension of the Imam being al-Insanul Kamil. You see, what does it mean when we say al-Insanul Kamil, the perfect man? People, they think that al-Insanul Kamil, it means that a person has perfection in akhlaq. No, this is not the meaning. Without a doubt, Amir al-Mu'mineen had a perfection in his character. But what the term Insanul Kamil it means is that this perfect man is the ultimate manifestation of the asma of Allah. And he is that reality through which Allah is understood, that in one sense he is Wajhullah. That when we say Amir al-Mu'mineen is Wajhullah, why do we call the Imam the face of God, Wajhullah? You see, the face is that entity through which you recognize a person. The face is that entity through which you understand a person. When Amir al-Mu'mineen is Wajhullah, the face of God, what this means is that when you want to understand Allah in His truest sense, then Ali bin Abi Talib is that median to do so. So you find Al-Insan al-Kamil is that individual who is Wajhullah. Al-Insan al-Kamil is that individual who is Hujjatullah, the proof of Allah. And what this means is that for the system of the universe to continue, there needs to be a divine proof that God upon the day of judgment, he says that I have preserved my religion through him for you. Otherwise, one could argue that, oh Allah, you left us alone. You left us astray. We didn't have a guide. But Allah will use that hujjah. And that's why the hadith, it says, لولا الحجة لساخت الأرض بأهلها. That if it wasn't for this hujjah, this divine proof, the earth, it would collapse with its inhabitants. You find when we say Ali is Waliullah, when we say Ali is Al-Insanul Kamil, we find that he was this perfect teleological entity. And the second aspect of Al-Insanul Kamil is that Al-Insanul Kamil is the one who has internalized the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. You see, in Islamic spirituality, there are two fundamental sources, as in every other area of Islamic thought, and that is the Quran and the Sunnah. In Islamic spirituality, the more one internalizes the Sunnah and the more one internalizes the Quran, the more elevated that individual he can be. So you find in this sense that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib is the one who internalized the Sunnah of Rasulullah. You see, and he did this both internally and externally. See, what I mean by the Sunnah is not just you act how Rasulullah acted, but there is the inner dimension and perfection of the Prophet. That what the Prophet he manifested outwardly, you find each believer according to his limited capacity, he contains it in potential, in potentia. And this is why the Quran, it says, "An-Nabiyyu awla bil mu'minina min anfusihim," that the Prophet is closer to the believers than themselves. That Rasulullah, his reality is closer to the believers than themselves. But without a doubt, there was none closer to Rasulullah than Ali bin Abi Talib. As Rasulullah says, Ya Ali, anta ka nafsi ya Ali, that you are like my spirit, O Ali. And he says, Anta minni wa ana minka. And he says, Oh Ali, you are from me and I am from you, O Ali bin Abi Talib. Further than that, you find, we look in the verse of Mubahila. It says, ثُمَّ نَبْتَهِلْ فَنَجْعَلْ لَعْنَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Before it says this line, it says, فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا, that go and call upon them. نَدْعُوا أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. That go and call upon them and say, that call your children, we will call our children. That call your women, we will call our women. And call yourselves, we'll call ourselves. That on that day, the nafs of Rasulullah was none other than Ali bin Abi Talib. And in this sense, you find this idea of Ali being the nafs of Rasulullah. It has an internal manifestation and it has an external manifestation. The internal manifestation is that Ali was from the same light as the Prophet, as Rasulullah, he says, Ana wa Aliyun min nurin wahid, that me and Ali are from the same light. And you find the external manifestation of this line is that line from Nahjul Balagha, where Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, I followed the Prophet in the way a baby camel follows its mother. You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he uses this analogy, a baby camel, when it walks directly underneath its mother. It takes the same steps its mother it takes. It doesn't go left, it doesn't go right, it doesn't fall behind, it doesn't go ahead. In this manner, you find that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, this is how I was with the Prophet of God. So we see from the first level, the Sunnah was internalized in Amir al-Mu'mineen. But the second dimension of Ali bin Abi Talib being al-Insanul Kamil is that Amir al-Mu'mineen is the one who internalized the Quran. In reality, he was the mujassam and the embodified Quran. Rasulullah, he says in a hadith that Aliyun ma'al Qur'anu wal Qur'anu ma'a aliyan. The Prophet, he says that Ali is with the Quran and the Quran is with Ali bin Abi Talib. And I'm speaking fast. There's many things to cover. Our time is limited upon this day. But if we don't speak about the fadail and the virtues of Ali bin Abi Talib on the day of Ghadir, then which other occasion are we going to mention this? So you find the Prophet, he says. So the discussion right now is the discussion of al-Insanul Kamil. We discussed how Amir al-Mu'mineen internalized the reality of the Prophet and the Sunnah of the Prophet. But the second aspect of him being the ultimate spiritual pathway is that Amir al-Mu'mineen embodied the Quran. And Rasulullah, he says, Ali is with the Quran and the Quran is with Ali. What this means is that whatever qualities you find within the Quran, they should exist in Ali bin Abi Talib. If the Quran says Alif, Lam, Mim, Dalika al-Kitabu la rayba fi hudan lil muttaqin, that this is that book, there is no doubt within this book, then Amir al-Mu'mineen at some point must have said, Lo kushifa liyal ghita ma azdadtu yaqina. That if the veils were removed from me, it wouldn't increase my certainty, meaning there is no doubt within me, Ali bin Abi Talib. If the Quran, it says, it is hudan linnas wal bayyinat, that it is a guide for mankind and a decisive proof, then there must be a hadith that Rasulullah, he says to Ali bin Abi Talib, Anta tubayyanu li ummati makhtalafu fihi ba'di, that, oh Ali, you will explain and clarify for my ummah what they would dispute about after me. If the Quran has been called a furqan, when it says تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا, that blessed is the one who revealed the furqan upon his servant so it can be a warning for all of the universe. That the word furqan, it means a divider between truth and falsehood. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen must be that divider between truth and falsehood. When he says, Ana kasimun nari wal jannah, that I am the one who distributes between heaven and hell. You see, whenever you recite the virtues of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I remember those lines that Abdul Fuad al-Baqi, he wrote and is engraved upon the dome of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Najaf today. You find Abdul Fuad al-Baqi, he says that Anta al-Ali alladhi fawqa al-ula rufiya bibatni makkata wa wasat al-bayti id wadiya. You know what he says? He says, Anta al-Ali, that you are the elevated one. And he uses a double entendre here. He says, you are Ali by your name, but you are also Ali as an attribute, the elevated one. He says, you are the one who was elevated, that when you were brought in the land of Makkah and in the middle of the house. So you find all of these virtues, they exist in Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali bin Abi Talib. Now you find when one has embodied the Quran, and one has internalized the sunnah of the Prophet, and he is al-insanul kamil, you find that this has one impact in his worldview, and this has one impact in his existential position. In terms of his existential position as al-insanul kamil, you find that it makes Ali greater than all of the anbiya except Rasulullah, and greater than all of the malaika and the angels. And we have shawahid and proof for both of them. In terms of Amir al-Mu'mineen being greater than the Anbiya, you find there is a hadith which is even mentioned in the Musnad of Ahmad bin Hanbal, which says, Man arada an yandura ila Adama fi ilmihi wa ila Nuhin fi حلمه وعلى إبراهيم في خلته وإلى موسى في هيبته وإلى عيسى في زهده فلينظر إلى علي bin Abi Talib, the one who wants to see Adam in his knowledge, and Noah in his forbearance, and Musa in his grandeur, and Jesus in his asceticism, then have him look at Ali bin Abi Talib. That all of the sifat and the attributes of the Anbiya are gathered within this Insanul Kamil. But at the second level, you find this makes him greater than the Malaika as Al-Insanul Kamil as well. It's stated that one day that there was a man who was following Amir al-Mu'mineen and showing great respect to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Rasulullah says to that man, oh man, what is your name? Jibreel, he says to the Prophet, that I am Jibreel. Rasulullah says, oh Jibreel, why are you showing this respect to Ali bin Abi Talib? Jibreel says, oh Rasulullah, I am just showing a respect that a student shows towards a teacher. Rasulullah says, what do you mean that Ali bin Abi Talib is your teacher? He says that when Allah, He created me, He placed me in front of the Arsh, and the grandeur of the Arsh, it mesmerized me. Allah, He said to me, Man ana wa man ant, that who am I and who are you? At that point, I didn't have a reply to the creator of the universe, and I had no words at my tongue. But at that point, I heard someone whisper into my ear, and he said, قُلْ أنت رب الجليل وأنا عبدك الذليل. I like these words so much. I said to Allah, أنت رب الجليل وأنا عبدك الذليل, that you are the Lord of grandeur and I am your lowly servant. Allah, He liked my reply so much, He made me the angel in charge of wahi and the revelation. He says, when I turned around to look at who that person was, I saw it was none other than Ali bin Abi Talib. This is the status of Al-Insanul Kamil, that greater than every Nabi except Rasulullah, and greater than all of the Malaika. But you find Al-Insanul Kamil, and I come towards my conclusion of this entire discussion. Al-Insanul Kamil is the one whose worldview, it manifests Tawheed. You see, when you study Nahjul Balagha, when you study any of the works of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the goal behind this study at one level is to establish a worldview. That when you look at the world around you, what do you see, what do you understand as its purpose and as its driving force? You see, Amir al-Mu'mineen's worldview was a worldview of Tawheed. And there's one incident in particular which manifests this. It's stated that upon the day of Jamal, as Amir al-Mu'mineen is fighting upon that day, a Bedouin comes towards the Imam and he says, "Is Allah one?" When he asked this question, all of the companions, they jump upon this man. They say, "Don't you see that the heart of Amir al-Mu'mineen is divided?" Meaning Ali bin Abi Talib is busy. That what time is this to ask a question? That we're in the middle of a battlefield and you are asking that is Allah one? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies by saying, and this reply of Amir al-Mu'mineen, it shows the worldview of the Imam. The Imam says, let this man ask. For what he is asking about Tawheed, is what we want from the people. You see, this line shows that every intention, every action, every movement in the life of Ali bin Abi Talib was for the establishment of Tawheed. And you find Amir al-Mu'mineen on the battlefield. He gives one of the most fascinating discourses on what it means for the unity of God. He says that when you say Allah is one, there are two aspects of this which can be appropriate, and there are two ways which you can take it where it's wrong. As for that which is wrong, if you say that Allah is one, and you mean by it that Allah is numerically one, then this is wrong. Man la thani lahu la yadkhul fi bab al-a'dad. That which does not have a second cannot be numerically counted. So God's oneness is not a numerical oneness. Then the second thing he says is that if you say Allah is one, and you mean he is one of a species, of a type of creation, then that is wrong. So the man says that what is the correct aspect of the oneness of God? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, if you say Allah is one, and you mean that there is none like him, then this is what we mean when we say Allah is one. And then he says that this is the true meaning of ahad, that God cannot be divided in the imagination, in existence, or in any form. This is the reality of God. You see, only al-insanul kamil can deliver a discourse like this. Only Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib can deliver a discourse like this. Every aspect of the life of the Imam displays perfection upon perfection. You see, even when it comes to ilm, Amir al-Mu'mineen is there. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he has a line. He says that if I was given an opportunity, he says, لو شئت لَاسْتَخْرَجْتُ مِنَ الْمَاءِ نُورًا وَالنَّارًا. You know, it stated Amir al-Mu'mineen that one day he was sitting by the Furat with his companion. And he says to his companion that if I wanted, I would have brought fire and a light out of this water. Now, you find that this idea, the Imam, he can do it literally as well. But you find many people years later, they would see that through water, electricity can be created, that energy can come from water. Amir al-Mu'mineen demonstrated his ilm as insanul kamil much before. You find when it comes to generosity, they say to Ali, who is more generous, you or Hatim al-Ta'i? Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says that Hatim used to have a complex, and that complex had 7 doors. When somebody would knock at the first door, Hatim would give towards them. And when that same person would knock at the second door, he would cover his face and he would give so the person wouldn't be embarrassed. They say, oh Ali, who is more generous, you or this Hatim? Amir al-Mu'mineen says that if somebody knocked at my door, I would have gave them so much they wouldn't have to go to any other door. This is why the poet says that what Ali gave away in ruku, referring to the famous verse of the Quran, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. That your wali is God and the Prophet and the one who gives away zakat while in a state of ruku. He says what Ali gave away in ruku is greater than what Hatim gave away in a lifetime. And with that said, there are many aspects of Amir al-Mu'mineen to discuss. There is much to mention about the Imam, but no 50-minute lecture can do justice towards this. And with that said, I raise my hands. I say, Oh Allah, through the right of the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Alhamdulillah alladhi ja'alana min al-mutamassikina biwilayati Amir al-Mu'mineen, that we thank you that you have made us from amongst those who hold on to the wilayah of Ali bin Abi Talib. We pray for the sick and ailing within our community, particularly those who have been afflicted with this virus, which has become a global pandemic. We pray for any of those who upon this auspicious occasion of Ghadir have any needs, any hajat, that through the right of Ali bin Abi Talib granted towards them. And Ya Allah, we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم صل على.
Thank you, Moulana Sahab. On behalf of Al Fatma Islamic Center, Board of Trustees, and the whole community, I would like to thank you again for your amazing speech. Inshallah, we will see you in our Muharram programs. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. With this, I would like to ask Brother Mushtaba Mahdavi to recite Ziyarat to conclude this program. Brother Mushtaba Mahdavi.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إلهي يزم البلاء وبره الخفا وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وضاقت الأرض ومنعت السماء وأنت المستعان وإليك المشتكى وعليك المعول في الشدة والرخاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أولي الأمر الذين فرضت علينا طاعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو أقرب. يا محمد يا علي يا علي يا محمد اكفياني فإنكما كافيان وانصراني فإنكما ناصران. يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان الغاو كالغاو أدركني الساعة العجال يا أرحم الراحمين بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي الزكي. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا السلام عليك يا زينب الكبرى. السلام عليك يا بني فاطمة معصومة. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين. السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى كاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. كن شفيعنا شفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. السلام عليك يا محمد الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي الهادي. السلام عليك يا حسن العسكري الزكي. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من خير أعوانك وانصارك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الاحياء والاموات. طاب اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات انك مجيب الدعوات انك قاضي الحاجات انك على كل شيء قدير. ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم. Ya Allah, accept from all of us inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.